So this is an important change in the study of classic rhetoric because we move from Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle to the Sophists. And the Sophists are actually contemporaries of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, but they're the other camp in the study of rhetoric, the other side of this, and are hugely important to how we study rhetoric today. So in terms of their origins, they're primarily from Sicily, and so Sicily is that, well, it sort of looks like the rock that the boot of Italy is tripping over. Oh, Maya! Right. So that's yeah, so that's the Sophists. The Sophists are primarily coming from Sicily, not all, but primarily. At the time, Sophist meant, on occasion I hear sophist, but sophist, meant man of wisdom. Today it means deceiver, right? People who engage in sophistry are using pretty language to try and trick us. It's their sophistry. Right? So they did not focus on truth. They focused on perception. What is the perception we have of the world? Right? How do we look at things? How do we make sense of it? How are we perceiving it? Not what is truth, but how do we perceive it? Right? As you might imagine, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle despised them. Like, yeah, Socrates, he actually, yeah, like, we'll talk about Gorgias in a moment. I said he had that dialogue with Gorgias, that Plato, right, scribed down. Yeah, and that was a whole debate on is rhetoric about truth or not. Right? So they didn't aim at truth. Or so I'm saying is that Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, sort of most harsh being Socrates, then Plato, and then least is Aristotle, despise the Sophists because, one, they didn't aim at truth, right? Their goal was not truth, but it was about, well, first it could just be about winning an argument, but they were focused on perception and how we saw things, not what was the truth of the thing. And they were appalled that people would argue any side of an issue. Think about when you study or practice debate, you're probably taught to argue both sides so you understand it all better. Arguing a side you don't believe in, appalling. That is an anathema to Socrates, right? And so like Aristotle's student, who is effectively Isocrates, is more liberal still, and he starts being a little bit more of that. Well, I mean, the value of debate sort of stuff. So there is some shift there. Also, fun fact: people like Socrates just could not understand people being paid to teach others how to speak. Remember when I said that the good old boys are privileged? Yeah. So they couldn't believe that people were taking money to teach others how to be effective speakers. It's funny how you do that when you're not independently wealthy. All right, moving on. So the Sophists, some of the greats, Protagoras, right? Protagoras is and he also talked about the value of debate, right? That's the value of debate, that when sides clash against each other, we're able to see things differently. We're able to understand our own position as we argue the other side. That perhaps a clearer picture comes out. We look at something from both sides, right? That's Protagoras. Right? And then we get Gorgias. Gorgias. So, fun fact for you, when I was in grad school, yeah, getting my PhD, we put together an intramural football team in our department among the graduate students and some of the faculty to then play against undergraduate students. How well did we do? Only slightly better than you think, because we went all the way to the playoffs because we got every single team ended up forfeiting for one reason or another. Every single game until the playoffs. And one of our plays was called Go Go Gorgias. I have notes here somewhere on that little plan. Okay, so Gorgias, whom I love greatly, and Gorgias, by the way, is from the island of Leontini. You don't have to know that, but he said we build reality through language. Right? So through language we build reality. That should sound oddly familiar to you if you look at the definition of rhetoric I gave in this class, right? And that comes in part from, if you want to know, the work by John Polakis. You don't have to know that name, but I'm telling you, that's the lineage here is John Polakis writing about Gorgias, and his definition of rhetoric is the definition that I draw from, and he gets it from Gorgias. Right? He says that through language we create a world of possibility. Again, this should be sounding a lot like that first day lecture from rhetorical criticism, right? So the sophists, right, as an example of them, we get Gorgias wrote something called the Encomium of Helen. And there is Helen, Helen of Troy. In case you're not familiar, in short, Helen of Troy goes away with Paris, and this launches the Trojan War. And so Gorgias writes the Encomium of Helen, and Encomium is a defense. Because some people said, how could Helen do this, right? And he says in the Encomium of Helen, which you can still read, not much of his work, many of his works have survived, but this one has. And he says, well, I think what happened was that the gods decided that they should be together. And if the gods decided, who are we to argue? Oh, and he said, but then again, perhaps she was abducted. And you don't blame the victim, right? So Gorgias says, again, through rhetoric is possibility. There's different ways of looking at something. There's not absolute truth. Maybe the gods decide. It's the will of the gods. Who are we to argue, please, right? Maybe Helen was abducted. Or maybe powerful words persuaded her. He says that words can be like a drug acting upon us. Some great stuff he writes, right? He says she's persuaded. So maybe that's why. Maybe Paris was able to persuade her with powerful words. And we've all become victim to powerful words, right? So here we have three options. Oh my gosh, these different forms of truth. This is awful. I know. There's a fourth one too. He says, and perhaps Helen fell in love. And who are we to deny love? The point of this Encomium of Helen is a good example of sophistic rhetoric, as we'd say sophistic, right? The rhetoric of the sophist, that's opposed to making an argument of what happened, but of saying it is this, but perhaps it's that, or the other, or even the other thing. And it gets us to go from thinking that the world is thus to saying, well, it could be some different things. So that's what the sophists do. So this is the roots here of study of our rhetoric today here in the U.S. This is classical rhetoric. Woohoo!